Sir, she heard you. Olivia's voice was barely a whisper, but Ethan Parker didn't even flinch. He shoved her hand off his arm like she was a stranger who'd touched him on a train, straightened his collar, and laughed toward the open doorway where his wife of 15 years stood holding a still warm anniversary dinner in both hands. Let her hear it, he said. Claire will never understand this world. She's just comfortable being my wife. He was wrong, and he had no idea how wrong. If you love stories where the quiet one turns out to be the strongest person in the room, subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end. And do me a favor, comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. Ethan Parker woke at 4:45 that morning without an alarm because a man who needs an alarm is a man who can still be surprised, and Ethan hadn't allowed himself to be surprised in years. Claire was already awake. She'd been awake since 4. She always was on days that mattered. You're up early, he said, pulling a shirt from the closet, not looking at her. It's a big day. Every day's a big day, Claire. That's the job. She let the sentence sit there a moment. She'd gotten good at that. 15 years of marriage teaches you where the traps are in your own kitchen. Ethan. Do you know what today is? He was buttoning his cuff. His hand stopped for exactly 1 second, and that 1 second told her everything. Wednesday, he said. Right. It's a Wednesday, and I have the Halverson call at 7 and the board at 9, and if Gerald starts on the burn rate again, I'm going to put my head through a window. He looked up then finally and smiled the smile he used on cameras. Why, what's Wednesday? Claire poured his coffee. Black, no sugar, the way he'd taken it since the year they couldn't afford sugar. Nothing, she said. Drink that before it gets cold. He drank it standing up. He did everything standing up now. You're quiet, he said. I'm always quiet. No, you're quiet. There's a difference. He set the cup down. Look, if this is about the dinner. Saturday, I told you, Marcus can't handle the Halverson people alone. They eat kids like him for... It's not about Saturday. Then what? She looked at him. Really looked the way you look at a photograph of someone who died. Nothing, Ethan. Go be brilliant. He kissed the top of her head on the way out, the way you'd pat a dog you were fond of, but didn't have time for, and the door closed, and Claire Morgan Parker stood alone in a kitchen the size of the apartment where they'd started, and said out loud to no one 15 years. Her sister called at 9. Bernadette had a sense for these things, the way some people can smell rain. He forgot. Bernie. He forgot, didn't he? Say it. He's busy. Claire. He has the Halverson call. I don't care if he has a call with the Almighty himself. It's 15 years. Bernadette's voice went up half an octave the way it had since they were girls in Spokane. Do you remember what he said at the wedding? He said, I will never let this woman feel ordinary a single day of her life. 200 people heard it. Aunt Ruth cried into a napkin. People say things at weddings. People mean things at weddings. Claire wound the phone cord around her finger. She still kept a landline one in the kitchen because Ethan hated it, and it was the only thing in the house he hadn't redecorated. I'm making the pot roast, she said. Silence on the line. A long one. Claire. What? Honey, no. It's his favorite. It was his favorite in 2009 when he had holes in his shoes. Bernadette exhaled hard. You're going to drive downtown and carry a pot roast into a building with his name on it and stand there like a delivery girl, and I am telling you right now, as the only person alive who has known you since you had a lisp, I don't have a lisp. You had a lisp, and you also had a full ride, and you also had a doctoral offer from Carnegie Mellon that you turned down so that man could have a wife who was home. So no, don't make the pot roast. Claire looked at the oven. It's already in, she said. Bernadette laughed once, and it wasn't a happy sound. Of course it is. She braised it for 4 hours. She made the carrots the way his mother used to, before his mother stopped speaking to him. She wrapped the whole thing in 3 towels, so it would still be hot in 40 minutes of traffic, and she put it in a canvas bag with wooden handles, and she wore the blue dress. She was 51 years old, and she wore the blue dress because he had once in a parking lot outside a Denny's told her she looked like the future in it. Margaret Reed called while Claire was on I-5. Well, she lives... Margaret, 15 years today, isn't it? Claire's hands tightened on the wheel. How do you always remember? Because I was there, and because I have a mind like a bear trap, and because I have never in my professional life seen a woman sign a marriage certificate with the same face people use to sign confessions. Margaret's voice was gravel and cigarettes and 40 years of making men sweat in depositions. How is he? Busy. That's not what I asked. He's fine, Margaret. Claire, he's fine. You know what I love about you? You lie like an engineer, precisely and only about the one variable that matters. A pause. The trust still sits where it sits. Claire changed lanes. Why are you asking me that today of all days? Because I ask you every year, and every year you tell me not to ask, and I keep asking because one day the answer is going to matter, and I want to have been the one who asked. It sits where it sits. Good. He doesn't know Margaret. I'm aware. He's never once asked. I'm aware of that too, dear Margaret said, and it has always told me more about that man than anything he's ever said in an interview. Claire hung up in this parking garage. She sat for a moment with her hands in her lap. It's a pot roast, she said to the windshield. Don't make it a whole thing. Walter had worked the lobby of the Parker Tower since it was still a hole in the ground with a fence around it, and Walter loved exactly two things in this world, his granddaughter and Mrs. Parker. Well, look what walked in. Hi, Walter. Is that? He leaned across the desk and inhaled like a man in a church. Mrs. Parker, is that a roast? 15 years today? 15. Walter shook his head slowly. 15 years of that man, and you still cook for him. They ought to put you on a stamp. Don't start. I'm only saying what the whole building says. He slid the visitor badge across and held on to it half a second too long. He upstairs 41st. Walter didn't let go of the badge. Walter. Ma'am, why are you looking at me like that? He let go of the badge. No reason, Walter said. You have a good anniversary, Mrs. Parker. She thought about that all the way up. Dana was at the desk outside the executive floor, and Dana's face did something remarkable when the elevator opened. It performed an entire 5-act tragedy in under a second, and then settled into a smile that was one size too small. Mrs. Parker, hi. Hi. Wow. Hi, Dana. I didn't. Did you have an appointment? I don't have you on the... I don't need an appointment, sweetheart. I'm his wife. Right. Of course. Dana stood up, then sat, then stood again. It's just, it's a really packed morning he's in with the Halverson people. Yes, Halverson. That call was at 7. Dana's smile shrank another size. It ran long. Claire set the bag on the counter, gently, the way you set down something you don't want to break. Dana. Yes, ma'am. How long have you worked here? 2 years in August. Do you like it? Yes, I love it. Everybody says he's the best in the city to work for. Everybody says a lot of things. Claire picked the bag back up. I'm going to go say happy anniversary to my husband now. Mrs. Parker. It's fine. Mrs. Parker, please. And Dana came around the desk so fast her chair spun and she stopped herself. Physically, stopped herself, one hand halfway to Claire's arm, and Claire watched a 26-year-old girl decide whether to keep her job or keep her soul. Dana lowered her hand. The hallway curves, she said quietly. On the left. His door doesn't always latch. Claire looked at her for a long moment. Thank you, she said. I didn't say anything. No, Claire agreed. You didn't. She got 20 feet down the hall before a young man nearly ran her over, carrying 3 monitors, which is 2 more monitors than any human being should carry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't. He got them balanced. He was maybe 26, maybe 27, with the specific exhaustion of someone who genuinely loved his work. Are you okay? I'm fine. Are you here for the Halverson thing? Because if you are, I have to warn you the demo's going to be rough. The inference layer is doing this thing where I'm not here for the Halverson thing. Oh. He readjusted the monitors. I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Whitfield. Engineering. Claire. Nice to meet you, Claire. He said it like he meant it, which was rare in that building. Then he tilted his head. Sorry, do you work in legal? You look really familiar. No. Huh. He shrugged. Well, Anyway, if you see the man himself up there, tell him the routing kernel's still holding at 99.9, 15 years old, and that thing still hasn't broken once. It's honestly kind of a miracle. We rewrote everything around it, and we still can't touch it. Claire went very still. The routing kernel. Yeah, it's the core of everything. It's the whole reason we exist, basically. Marcus grinned. There's a legend about it in engineering. Nobody in the building knows who actually wrote it. Some guys say Parker wrote it himself in a weekend. Some say it was a contractor. There's a comment in the source like buried down in the initializer. It says for E, because you believed me first. The elevator dinged somewhere behind her. Someone laughed on another floor. The building went on breathing. You okay, Marcus said. You went kind of white. I'm fine. Are you sure? Because Marcus? Yeah, don't let them touch that kernel, Claire said. Whatever they tell you, don't let them touch it. He laughed, uncertain. Okay. Yes, ma'am. She walked on. The hallway curved exactly as Dana had said, and the door was open exactly as Dana had said. 4 inches, maybe 5. Enough for a voice to come through it like water through a crack in a dam. Ethan's voice, laughing, "You worry too much," and a woman laughing back. Claire stopped. She would think about that moment for the rest of her life. Not the words, the moment before the words, the 2 seconds when she still had the option of turning around, of pretending the elevator was slow, of going home and putting the roast on the counter and telling Bernadette it was lovely. 2 seconds. She could feel them passing. She stayed. Sir, if she calls again, I don't know what to tell her. The woman's voice was younger. Careful. That's 3 times this week. Tell her I'm in meetings. I've told her you're in meetings 3 times this week. Then tell her a 4th time, Olivia, that's what the job is. The bag handles bit into Claire's fingers. I just feel bad, Olivia said. She sounds nice. She is nice. A chair creaked. That's the problem. How is nice a problem? Because nice doesn't build anything. Ethan's voice took on that warm, reasonable boardroom cadence, the one that had raised $400 million. Look, Claire is a good woman. I'm not saying she isn't. She is a genuinely good woman, and I will never say a bad word about her. But she will never understand this world. She's comfortable being my wife. That's her ceiling, and there is no shame in that. Some people are built to hold the ladder, and some people are built to climb it. Olivia said nothing. Don't look at me like that. I'm not looking at you like anything. You're 29 and you're looking at me like I kicked a dog. I'm 31. You're looking at me like I kicked a dog. I just think Olivia said slowly that she calls a lot for someone who's comfortable. Something in Claire's chest turned over. She calls, Ethan said, because she doesn't have anything else to do. Do you understand what I'm telling you? She has a garden. She has a book club. She has a landline. Olivia, an actual landline in the wall like it's 1987. That's her whole life. And that's fine. I gave her that life. She wanted that life. What did she want it? What is this nothing, I'm asking? The chair creaked again. Ethan stood. Claire knew the sound of him standing the way you know your own heartbeat. Let me tell you something about ambition, he said, and his voice went somewhere else. Somewhere it went when there were cameras. I came out of nowhere. My father repaired transmissions. My mother cleaned 2 schools a night. I had nothing. And I built this company from an idea I had in an apartment with a broken radiator, and I stayed up for 6 days straight in 2010, and I did not sleep, and I did not eat, and I made something out of absolutely nothing. Claire's vision narrowed to a single point of light. I built this company, Ethan said. I sacrificed everything for it. There is a particular kind of silence that happens inside a person. It isn't peace. It's the sound a room makes when the power goes out. Every hum you didn't know was there gone all at once. Claire had been standing in a hallway with a pot roast. Now she was standing in 2010 in an apartment with a broken radiator at 3:40 in the morning with a blanket over her shoulders and 41 hours of no sleep, and a compile error she had been chasing for 2 days, and Ethan was asleep on the couch behind her because he had an investor breakfast and she solved it. She solved it at 3:41 and she turned around to wake him, and then she didn't because he needed to be rested because he was the face. And she sat there alone at a card table and watched the routing kernel come alive on a 14-inch screen, and she cried quietly so she wouldn't wake him. For E, because you believed me first. She had typed that at 3:44 in the morning. He had never even read it. "You don't sleep for 6 days," Olivia said, and there was something odd in her voice now, something flat and careful, and Claire would understand it much later. "That's in the Forbes piece, too. It's in the Forbes piece because it's true. 6 days. 6 days. Nobody survives 6 days, Mr. Parker." Ethan laughed. "I did." And Claire, who had been silent through 15 years, through the moved-up flights and the canceled Christmases, and the night her mother died in a hospital in Spokane while he was in Tokyo, and said on the phone, "I can't. Claire, the round closes Friday." Claire made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was smaller than a word. It was air leaving a body. The office went quiet. "Did you hear that?" Ethan said. Claire couldn't move. Her legs were not receiving instructions. "Footsteps, sir." "Wait." The footsteps stopped 1 step from the door, close enough that she could hear him breathing, close enough that she could smell the cologne she'd bought him in a duty-free shop in Amsterdam 11 years ago, and that he had worn every single day since without ever once remembering where it came from. The door moved an inch. Sir Olivia said, "You're 9:15. A pause that lasted a decade. "Right," Ethan said, and the footsteps went back. Claire breathed. "Where were we?" "You were building the company from nothing," Olivia said, and this time even Claire could hear it. The woman was writing him down. "Actually, could I ask you something?" "Off the record. Human to human." "Sure. The kernel. The original one. The routing thing everybody in engineering treats like a religious artifact." Claire's fingers went numb around the wooden handles. "What about it?" Ethan said. "Who wrote it?" The silence in that office had a shape to it. "I did," Ethan said. Just like that, 2 syllables, 15 years and 40,000 hours and a doctoral offer, and her mother's funeral, and a card table in an apartment with a broken radiator, and he handed it away to a stranger in 2 syllables without a single crack in his voice. "Huh," Olivia said. "Wow. Why?" "No reason. It's good work. It's the best work I've ever done," Ethan Parker said in a building with his name on it 12 feet from the woman who had done it. Claire turned around. She did not scream. She did not push the door open. She did not stand in that doorway and take his life apart in front of a woman whose name she had only learned 4 minutes ago. She turned around and she walked. She walked past Marcus, who said, "Hey, Claire, are you sure you're—" and didn't finish because she was already gone. She walked past Dana, who stood up and did not say a word, and whose eyes were wet, and who understood exactly what had happened and would never mention it to a living soul. At the elevator, Claire looked down and discovered she was still holding the bag. She looked at it for a long moment. 4 hours of braising. His mother's carrots. The doors opened. "Mrs. Parker." Walter in the lobby coming around the desk fast. "Mrs. Parker, you all right? You're walking like Walter." "Ma'am." She held out the bag. "Are you hungry?" Walter looked at the bag. He looked at her face. He was 64 years old and had spent his life reading people who walked through doors, and he did not ask a single question. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I am. It's pot roast. It's still warm. There's carrots. Mrs. Parker, give some to your granddaughter." "Ma'am, are you—" "I'm fine, Walter." She was already walking. "Tell her it's from a friend." She made it to the car. She got in. She closed the door. And she sat in the concrete dark of a parking garage under a building with her husband's name on it, and she did not cry, and that frightened her more than crying would have. Her phone rang at 12:04. Ethan. She looked at it for 4 rings. "Hello." "Hey. Hey, babe. Traffic sounds." He was walking. "Listen, I'm so sorry today's a disaster. Halverson ran long, and now Gerald wants a sit-down before the OK, before the board thing, and I'm probably not going to make it home for dinner. Is that okay? Tell me that's okay." Claire watched a man 3 cars over load a briefcase into a trunk. "That's okay. You're the best. You're honestly the best." A car door. "What did you do today?" And there it was, the question he never asked. He asked it now on the one day because he was feeling guilty, because guilt makes men curious for about 11 seconds. "I made a roast," Claire said. "Yeah, what for?" Something in her went perfectly beautifully calm. "No reason," she said. "I had the afternoon." Right. He wasn't listening. She could hear him not listening. "Hey, save me a plate." "It's gone." What I gave it away. You okay? A laugh distracted. Weird. Okay, I love you. I gotta run. Don't wait up. Ethan. Yeah. She almost said it. She felt it come all the way up her throat, 15 years of it, and she held it in her mouth like a stone. Nothing, she said. Go be brilliant. The house was very quiet when she got home. She stood in the entryway for a while. Then she went upstairs, and she did not go to their bedroom. She went down the hall past the room they had meant to make a nursery in 2013 and never spoke about again to the small room at the end that Ethan called Claire's office, with a fond little smile whenever anyone toured the house, the way you'd say the dog's room. There was a closet in that room. In the closet was a fireproof box. In the box was a folder gray, unlabeled, the corners soft from being handled exactly once a year for 15 years. She sat down on the floor with it in her lap. She opened it. Morgan Family Trust Schedule, a assigned intellectual property. Patent 8442109. Patent 8617335. Patent 9004772. Source code repository original commit time-stamped 3:44 a.m. November 9th, 2010, signed with a private key that had lived in a safe deposit box in Spokane, Washington since before Parker Global Solutions had a logo. Licensed to Parker Global Solutions, LLC, by the Morgan Family Trust, in perpetuity, revocable upon written notice by the sole trustee. Sole trustee, Claire Elizabeth Morgan. She remembered the day she signed it. She remembered Margaret Reed sliding the pen across a table and saying, I need you to understand what this is, because you are in love, and love makes people stupid, and I have watched brilliant women sign their lives away with a smile on their face. And Claire had said, he'd never do that to me. And Margaret had said, then it cost you nothing to sign. She had signed it because she loved him. She had kept it because, and she understood this only now sitting on the floor of a room he called hers, the way you'd call a shelf yours, because somewhere in the basement of her heart, some small, unforgiving engineer part of her had always been running a diagnostic on this man. 15 years. Quietly. In the background. Never saying a word. And this morning at 11:58 a.m., in a hallway, it had finally returned a result. Claire read the last page twice. Then she took out her phone. Margaret Reed's office. It's Claire Parker. A pause. The sound of a woman standing up. Put her through, Margaret said in the background, and then Claire. Margaret, what happened? Are you still licensed? Claire. I asked you a question. Are you still licensed in Washington State? Margaret Reed was 71 years old. She had buried 2 husbands and beaten the Justice Department twice. Yes, she said. I am. Good. Claire, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Are you hurt? No. Is he there? No. Then tell me what you want. Claire looked at the folder in her lap. The private key. The timestamp. 3:44 in the morning in an apartment with a broken radiator while the man she loved slept 12 feet away. For E, because you believed me first. He told a stranger he built it, Claire said, and her voice did not shake, and that too frightened her. He looked at a woman he'd never met and said he built it, Margaret. He wasn't even lying to hurt me. He said it so many times he believes it. He has genuinely forgotten that I exist. Claire. He said I'm comfortable being his wife. Oh, honey. He said some people hold the ladder. Claire, listen to me. I spent 15 years protecting his dream, Claire said. And on the floor of a small room at the end of a hallway, in a house she had paid for with a mind nobody in that entire glass tower knew the name of Claire Elizabeth Morgan, closed the folder. Now I'm going to protect mine. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Once we start, she said, there is no going back. You understand that? Not for him, not for you, not for the marriage, not for the 1,100 people who work in that building, not for one single thing in your life. I will not be able to stop it, and neither will you. Claire stood up. She walked to the window. Somewhere across the water, 41 floors up, her husband was explaining to a board of directors that the burn rate was under control. Margaret, she said. Yes, bring the pen. Margaret Reed arrived at 6:40 that evening, with a briefcase, a thermos, and a look on her face that Claire had only seen once before at her mother's funeral. Where is he? Board dinner. He won't be home before midnight. Good. Margaret set the briefcase on the kitchen counter next to the landline. Because if that man walked through the door right now, I would say something that would cost me my license. Margaret. I'm 71 years old, Claire. I'm allowed one felony. She poured coffee from her own thermos into her own cup, because Margaret Reed had never in her life trusted another woman's coffee, and then she sat down and folded her hands. Tell me exactly what he said. Not the summary, the words. Does it matter? It's the only thing that matters. I don't need your feelings, I have plenty of my own. I need his sentences. So Claire told her, all of it flat in order the way you'd read a log file. The hallway, the door. Some people hold the ladder and some people climb it. The 6 days without sleep in 2010. And then the last part, the part she had to stop twice to get through. She asked him who wrote the Colonel. And he said, I did. Margaret didn't move. He said it fast, Claire went on. That's the thing I can't. Margaret, he didn't hesitate. There was no pause. A liar pauses. A liar has to reach for it. He didn't reach for anything. It was just sitting there right on the surface like it was true. Because to him it is true. Yes. Because you gave it to him for free every day for 15 years, and a thing you get for free stops having a price. Margaret unlatched the briefcase. Do you know what the cruelest part of this is? He isn't a monster. If he were a monster, this would be easy. He's just a man who was allowed to forget, and nobody in his entire life ever made him remember. Claire looked at the folder on the counter. I made it easy for him. Yes, you did. You're supposed to say no. I'm your lawyer, not your sister. Margaret pulled out 3 documents and laid them in a row. Now, business. At 7:15, Bernadette called the landline, and Claire made the mistake of answering. Was it lovely? Bernie? Was it lovely? Did he cry? Did he apologize? Is he going to take you somewhere with a beach? Bernie, stop. Something in her voice did it. 51 and 48 years old, and Bernadette Morgan still knew her sister's voice the way you know a smoke alarm. Claire, he didn't forget. What? He didn't forget the anniversary. He knew. He knew this morning. I watched him know it, and he chose not to say it because saying it would have cost him 10 minutes. A silence on the line. What happened? Bernadette said. I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to be quiet until I finish, which will be the hardest thing you've ever done. Claire, quiet. And Claire told her. And Bernadette Morgan, who had opinions about everything, who had once been asked to leave a PTA meeting, was quiet the entire way through. Then she said one thing. Is Margaret there? She's sitting right here. Put me on speaker. Claire did. Margaret. Bernadette. Bury him. Bernadette. I'm serious. I have been carrying this for 15 years, and I have kept my mouth shut because she asked me to, and I want you to hear me say it out loud in front of her. Bury that man so deep, they need a permit to find him. Margaret took a slow sip of coffee. That's the plan, she said. At 7:44, Margaret walked Claire through it, and the walking through took 9 minutes, and by the end of those 9 minutes, Claire understood that she had been holding a loaded weapon in a closet for a decade and a half without once looking at it. Say it again. The trust owns the intellectual property. The company licenses it in perpetuity, which sounds permanent and terrifies everyone, and is the reason nobody ever read past that word. Margaret tapped the page. Revocable upon written notice by the sole trustee. So you can end it, you, alone, today. Without a court, without a vote, without asking a soul. Margaret set down the cup. Claire, I want you to hear this in plain English. Parker Global Solutions is not a company that uses your technology. Parker Global Solutions is your technology wearing a suit. Everything else in that building, the sales team, the tower, his name on the front of it, the 1,100 people, the $400 million in capital, all of it is a house built on one foundation. And you own the foundation, and you have owned it the entire time, and he signed it. Claire stared at her. He signed it. Page 11. He signed it. On March the 4th, 2011, in my office with 2 witnesses at 11 in the morning. Margaret pushed the page across. He didn't read it. He asked me one question. Do you want to know what it was? No. He asked how long it would take, because he had a lunch. Claire looked at her husband's signature, big, confident, half a page wide, the signature of a man who had never once been afraid of a piece of paper. He had a lunch, she said. He had a lunch. At 8:20, Claire said the thing she'd been carrying since the parking garage. I don't want to hurt him. Margaret didn't sigh. She didn't roll her eyes. She had been waiting for this sentence all evening, and she'd had 4 decades to prepare for it. Say the rest of it. There is no rest of it. There's always a rest of it. Say it. Claire pressed her hands flat on the counter. I don't want to hurt him, she said, and I want him to know. There it is. I want him to know Margaret, not the money, not the tower. I don't care about the tower. I want him to stand in a room and understand one time for 1 second what I actually am. Her voice cracked finally 6 hours late. Is that revenge? Tell me if that's revenge, because I honestly don't know anymore. No, Margaret said. That's the bill. The bill. You've been extending that man credit since 2009. Every night you didn't sleep. Every conference you didn't speak at. Carnegie Mellon. Your mother's funeral. She let that one sit. You've been carrying his balance for 15 years, honey, and you never once sent a statement, and now you're going to. That's not revenge. Revenge is when you take something that isn't yours. This is collection. At 8:52, Claire asked the question that would change the shape of everything. Why did Olivia ask, "What about the Colonel?" Claire stood up. She started to move because she thought better moving she always had. Margaret, I keep going back to it. Why would an executive assistant ask her boss who wrote a piece of source code from 2010? Curiosity. No. Claire. No, listen to how she asked it. Claire closed her eyes. She said, could I ask you something off the record? Human to human. Off the record. Who says off the record that's not how you talk to your boss? That's how you talk to a witness. Margaret set her cup down very slowly. Say that again. And she pushed him, twice, on the 6 days. She said, nobody survives 6 days, Mr. Parker. She was checking his story, Margaret. She was checking a claim he's been making in print for 8 years, and she was letting him repeat it. Claire listened to me, and when he said he wrote the Colonel, she said, huh, wow. Claire opened her eyes. That's not a woman who's impressed. That's a woman who just got what she came for. Margaret Reed had spent 40 years in rooms full of men who lied for a living, and there was a particular stillness that came over her when a piece clicked into place, and Claire watched it come over her now. How long has that girl worked there? I don't know. 6 months? 8? Find out. Why? Because I have been doing this a very long time, Margaret said. And in my experience, when a woman appears in a fraudulent man's office and starts asking him to repeat his greatest hits, she is either in love with him or she is being paid by somebody who is not him. And Claire, she wasn't in love with him. How do you know? Because she felt bad for you, Margaret said. Mistresses don't feel bad for you. Mistresses hate you. It's the only honest thing about them. At 9:30, Claire's phone lit up. Ethan. She let it ring. It went to voicemail. It rang again. Answer it, Margaret said. Margaret, answer it and be exactly who you were yesterday. If you are cold to him tonight, he will smell it, and he has excellent instincts about exactly one thing in this world, and that thing is being caught. Claire picked up. Hey. Hey, babe. Restaurant noise. Men laughing somewhere behind him. He was 3 drinks in. She could hear it in the shape of his consonants. You still up? I'm up. Listen, Halverson's in. They're in. Gerald's about to have a stroke. It's the greatest night of my life. That's wonderful, Ethan. No, you don't understand. This is Claire. This is the whole thing. This is everything I've been telling you about for 2 years. A pause, a swallow. Hey, sorry about dinner. It's fine. You're not mad. I'm not mad. See, this is why. He said something away from the phone, laughed at something, came back. This is why I married you. You get it. You've always gotten it. You don't need the noise. Margaret was watching her across the counter. No, Claire said. I don't need the noise. God, I love you. Go celebrate Ethan. You're the best. Don't wait up. The call ended. Claire set the phone down and looked at it for a long moment. You okay? Margaret said. He said, this is why I married you. I heard. He believes that. Claire's hands had started to shake, and she pressed them flat on the counter to stop it. That's what I can't. He's not performing. He's not managing me. He genuinely believes that the reason he married me is that I don't need anything. 15 years, and the thing he loves about me is that I'm cheap to run." Margaret stood, walked around the counter, and put a hand on her back. "Sign the notice," she said quietly. "Margaret, sign it, honey." At 9:58, Claire Elizabeth Morgan signed her name. It took 4 seconds. That was the part nobody would believe later, that the largest technology collapse in the Pacific Northwest that decade took 4 seconds and a ballpoint pen in a kitchen at 10 o'clock at night next to a landline. Margaret witnessed it, dated it, photographed it, sent it to 2 separate servers and a safe in Spokane because Margaret Reed had not survived 40 years by trusting anything with a battery in it. When does it land? Formal notice goes to the company's registered agent at 9 a.m., copies to the board general counsel and the CEO. Margaret snapped the briefcase shut. It'll be on his desk before he takes his coat off. And then what? And then the license is dead, and every line of code in that building that touches your kernel becomes stolen property at 9:01 in the morning. Claire looked at the paper. 1,100 people work there, she said. Yes. Marcus works there, Dana works there, Walter works there. Yes. I'm not doing this to them. I know you're not. No, Margaret, listen to me, because this is the part I need. Claire turned around. The kernel doesn't go dark. The company doesn't go dark. The license terminates and I offer a new one the same morning from the trust on my terms to the company, not to him. Nobody misses a paycheck. Nobody's kid loses a dentist. The building runs. Margaret was quiet. You understand what that does? Tell me. It removes the only defense he has. Margaret almost smiled. If you shut it off, he gets to stand in front of that board and scream that his vindictive wife is holding 1,100 jobs hostage, and half of them will believe him because that's a story people know how to tell. But if you keep the lights on and take his name off the wall... She shook her head slowly. Then there's no villain in the room, Claire. There's just a man who has to explain out loud in front of everyone why the woman keeping his company alive is a woman he told a stranger was comfortable being his wife. Claire didn't say anything. You are not going to destroy him, Margaret said. You are going to remove him. Those are different, and he is going to spend the rest of his life discovering how different. At 12:40 in the morning, Ethan came home. Claire was in bed. She heard the door, the keys in the bowl, the 2 glasses of water he always drank standing at the sink, the shoes, the coat. 15 years of a soundtrack. He came in quietly, which was the worst part because it meant he was being considerate. He sat on the edge of the bed and took off his watch. You awake? Halverson. He exhaled long and happy. Claire, 400 million. That's a lot. That's not a lot. That's the ball game. He lay back on top of the covers with his clothes on, the way he'd done in the apartment with the broken radiator, and for one traitorous second her body remembered how much she'd loved him. You know what Gerald said? He said, Ethan, you've done something nobody's done. Gerald, who hates me. I keep waiting to feel it. He said it to the ceiling. Everybody says you get to a certain point and you feel it. I don't feel anything. Is that weird? Claire lay in the dark next to her husband. Ethan. Yeah. Do you remember 2010? He laughed, drowsy, warm. Do I remember it? 6 days, Claire. 6 days, no sleep. I made something out of nothing. She waited. She gave him one more second than he deserved. Yeah, she said. He was asleep in 4 minutes. Claire lay awake until 5:20, staring at nothing, listening to a man breathe. At 8:07 the next morning, Ethan Parker walked into his lobby. Morning, Walter. Walter didn't answer. Ethan was 6 steps past the desk before it registered, and he actually stopped and turned around, because in 11 years, Walter had never once failed to say good morning. Walter. Mr. Parker. You okay? You look like somebody died. Walter looked at him. Have a good day, sir, he said. At 8:19, Marcus Whitfield knocked on the frame of the CEO's open door with 3 lines of panic in his voice. Sir, sorry, legal's downstairs. Legal's always downstairs, Marcus. That's where we keep them. No, sir, outside legal. There's like 4 of them. They came in a car together. Ethan looked up. What? At 8:31, Dana put a gray envelope on his desk and did not say a word. What's this? It came by courier. For me? For the company, Dana said. And the board and the general counsel and you. Ethan looked at the envelope, then at her face. Dana. Yes, sir. Why are you looking at me like that? She left the room. At 8:34, Ethan Parker opened it and read the first paragraph and laughed out loud. He actually laughed. Alone in an office 41 floors up, he laughed the way you laugh at a parking ticket on a car you sold. This is a mistake, he said out loud. He read it again. This is a typo. This is somebody's typo. He got to page 2. At 8:36, he stopped laughing. At 8:37, he called Gerald. Gerald, hey, quick thing. This is going to sound insane, do we own our own technology? A silence on the line so long, Ethan checked the screen. Gerald, Ethan, Gerald said carefully, why are you asking me that? Because a piece of paper on my desk says we license it. We do license it. From who? From the Morgan Family Trust, Gerald said. We've licensed it since 2011. It's in every diligence packet we've ever produced. It's on page 11 of the founding documents, Ethan. It's the first thing every investor's lawyer reads, and the only reason it's never been an issue is that the license is in perpetuity. Ethan sat down. Morgan, he said. Morgan. Gerald, what's my wife's name? Another silence. And then quietly, the sound of a man in his 60s setting down a coffee cup very, very carefully. Oh my God, Gerald said. At 8:41, Ethan called Claire. It rang 11 times. At 8:44, he called again. It rang 11 times. At 8:46, he called the landline. The landline he'd mocked for a decade, the one in the wall like it's 1987. And Claire picked up on the second ring. Hello? What did you do? Good morning, Ethan. Claire, what did you do? I terminated the license, she said. You should read the whole thing. There's a second document behind it. You? He was standing. She could hear him standing. Claire, do you understand what you've done? Do you have any idea what you're holding? There are 1,100 people in this building. Nobody's losing their job. There are $400 million that closed last night. There is a term sheet with Halverson's signature on it. Ethan. And you have gone, and what you got a lawyer. Is this Margaret? Did Margaret put you up to... Ethan? What? Claire waited 3 full seconds. Do you know what today is? She said. The line went silent. She could hear him breathing. She could hear a building full of people behind him. She could hear faintly a phone ringing on a desk that nobody was answering. Claire, he said, and his voice had changed. Claire, wait. Wait, yesterday. Yesterday was 15 years. Oh, God. I brought you a pot roast, Claire said. Your mother's carrots. I stood in your hallway for 6 minutes. Claire. The door doesn't latch, Ethan. Nothing. Not a sound. And Claire, who had run diagnostics on this man for 15 years, listened to the exact moment a 50-something-year-old man in a glass office understood what she had heard. Oh, no, he whispered. Oh, no, no, no. Some people hold the latter, Claire said. Claire, please listen to me. Who wrote the Colonel, Ethan? Claire. She asked you a question and you answered it in half a second. Her voice never rose, not once. I want you to sit in your chair and think about how fast you answered. Baby, don't. I was talking. It was talk. It was, you know how I am in a room. I get going. I say things. For 15 years, Claire, you said it to Forbes. She was very calm. You said it in Austin. You said it on a stage in Lisbon with my name on your travel booking because I made the booking. You said it at your mother's table on Thanksgiving, and I passed you the potatoes. Stop. You said 6 days without sleep. Claire, stop. It was 41 hours, Claire said, and it was me, and you were asleep on the couch, and I didn't wake you because you had a breakfast. Ethan Parker made a sound she had never heard him make in 15 years. I'm coming home, he said. No. I'm coming home right now. Read the second document, Ethan. I don't care about the second. Read it, Claire said, because at 9 o'clock your board is going to read it, and I would like you to have had 5 minutes. At 8:53, Ethan turned the page. Notice of new license offer. Morgan Family Trust to Parker Global Solutions, LLC. Same technology, same terms, same royalty, effective immediately upon acceptance. 3 conditions. He read them. He read them again. Claire, he said. Claire, what is this? It's mercy, she said. It's more than you gave me. Condition 1. His voice had gone strange hollow, like a man reading his own diagnosis. Full public correction of the record regarding authorship of the core technology. Yes. Condition 2. Appointment of the trustee to the board of directors. Yes. Condition 3. He stopped. Say it out loud, Ethan. Claire, say it out loud. You've been saying things out loud for 15 years. Say this one. And in an office with his name on the building at 8:54 in the morning, Ethan Parker read out loud, Resignation of the Chief Executive Officer. Claire closed her eyes. The board meets at 9, she said. Margaret's already in the lobby. Claire, I love you. Do you hear me? I love you. I have always loved you, whatever I said in that room. I know you love me, Claire said. That's the part I'm never going to get over, Ethan. You love me. You genuinely do. You just never once thought I was real. Claire. Goodbye. Claire. She hung up the phone. The old kind. The kind you hang up. And that she would think later was the only mercy in the whole design, that on the worst morning of her marriage, she got to end it with a sound. At 8:58, the phone rang again, and Claire almost didn't answer, and she would think about that for the rest of her life, too. It wasn't Ethan. It was a number she didn't know. Hello, Mrs. Parker. A woman's voice. Young, careful, familiar. Please don't hang up. Claire's hand tightened on the receiver. Who is this? My name is Olivia Chen, the woman said. I've been working in your husband's office for 8 months. I need to talk to you before 9 o'clock, and I need you to understand something first. I know what you are. No, ma'am, Olivia said. You really don't. You have 90 seconds, Claire said. The board meets at 9. I know when the board meets. I put it on the calendar. Then talk. Mrs. Parker, I'm not sleeping with your husband. Claire stood in her kitchen with the receiver against her ear and felt absolutely nothing, which surprised her. Every woman says that. Every woman doesn't have a badge number, Olivia said. At 8:59, Claire sat down. Say that again. My name is Olivia Chen. I'm a forensic investigator on contract to the Securities and Exchange Commission Seattle Regional Office. I've been placed in Ethan Parker's office since November. Everything I've said to that man in 8 months is on a recorded line, including yesterday at 11:58 in the morning when you were standing in the hallway and I saw you. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a truck backed up, beeping. You saw me, Claire said. I saw the shadow under the door. I knew it was you because your appointment wasn't on the books, and Dana had gone pale at her desk 40 seconds earlier, and I have been reading that office like a chessboard since Thanksgiving. A breath. Mrs. Parker. I kept him talking. What? He heard you. He said, Did you hear that? And he got up, and he was 1 step from that door, and I said, Sir, you're 9:15. Olivia's voice was very steady and very tired. I didn't do that for him. I did that for you, because I had 400 hours of that man on tape, and there was one thing I still didn't have, and I thought, God forgive me, I thought if she stays there another 30 seconds, he'll say it. Claire closed her eyes. Who wrote the Colonel? She said. Yes, ma'am. You used me. Yes, ma'am, Olivia said. I did. At 9:01 in a conference room 41 floors up, Gerald Vance called the meeting to order with a hand that was not entirely steady, and Margaret Reed sat down at the far end of the table without being invited, and nobody asked her to leave. At 9:01 in a kitchen in Medina, Claire said, Keep going. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I want you to understand that. I'm on a phone in a stairwell, and if my supervisor knew I was making this call, I'd be on administrative leave by lunch. Then why are you making it? Because in about 4 minutes that board is going to read your name. Olivia said. "And then a very large machine is going to start moving, and once it moves, nobody can stop it. And I decided that the woman who actually built the thing deserved 60 seconds of warning from a human being instead of a subpoena from a stranger." Claire's mouth had gone dry. "What's he done, Olivia?" "Which part?" "Start with the worst." "The worst is Halverson," Olivia said. "The $400 million he closed last night at a table full of men laughing. He sold them a company that owns technology it does not own. He made that representation in writing in a room to a fund with pension money in it at 9:40 last night, 11 hours ago. Before last night, it was arrogance. As of 9:40 last night, it's securities fraud." Claire put a hand on the counter. "He didn't know," she said. Silence on the line. "Olivia, he didn't know. He signed those papers in 2011, and he never read them, and he genuinely did not know Mrs. Parker. He's an idiot, not a criminal. He's the most spectacular idiot I have ever— Mrs. Parker, stop." "What?" "He knew," Olivia said. At 9:03, Claire heard a sound come out of her own body that she didn't recognize. What? March 2018, Series C, Diligence. Halverson's people weren't the first to read page 11. Sequoia's counsel flagged it 7 years ago. There's an email chain. Your husband was told in writing in a thread with 4 attorneys on it that the core IP sat outside the company in a trust controlled by his wife. Claire couldn't feel her hands. That's not no. He would have said something. He would have come home and said something. He replied to the thread in 11 minutes, Olivia said. "I have the reply. Do you want it?" "No." "Mrs. Parker." "Yes." Olivia read it, flat without inflection the way you read something you've read 200 times. "It's fine. It's Claire. She'd never use it. Bury it in the appendix and let's move." At 9:04, Claire Morgan discovered that a person can be standing perfectly still and falling at the same time. "Say it again." "Mrs. Parker." "Say it again." "It's fine. It's Claire. She'd never use it." "Bury it in the appendix." "Yes." "He knew for 7 years." Claire heard herself laugh one syllable, terrible. 7 years. He knew what I was holding, and he didn't take it from me. He didn't fight me for it. He didn't even ask me about it. No. He just decided I'd never use it. "Yes. Because I'm nice," Claire said. "Because you're nice," Olivia said. "Mrs. Parker, in 8 months, do you know how many times that man mentioned you to me?" "Don't." 4. "Don't." 4 times in 8 months, and one of them was yesterday, and I want you to know that I sat in that office and I hated him more on your behalf than I have ever hated a target in 9 years of doing this job. At 9:06 in the conference room, Gerald Vance said, "Before we get to Halverson, there's a matter of correspondence." And Ethan Parker said, "Gerald, give me the room for 5 minutes." And Gerald Vance, who had worked for him for 9 years, said, "No." At 9:06 in the kitchen, Claire said one word. "Why?" "Ma'am, not why he did it. Why me? Why did you call me Olivia? You have your case. You have 400 hours. You don't need me." The pause on the line was long enough that Claire knew the answer was going to hurt. "Because I do need you," Olivia said. "That's the honest answer, and you've had enough dishonest ones this week. Go on." "I have him on tape claiming authorship. That's a statement. A statement isn't fraud, it's ego. To make it fraud, I have to prove the statement is false. And to prove it's false, you need the author." "I need the author," Olivia said. "I need a living human being who can sit in a room and say under oath, 'I wrote it, here is the key. Here is the timestamp, here is the commit at 3:44 in the morning on November 9th, 2010. Claire was quiet. "Mrs. Parker, you want me to testify against my husband?" "Yes." "On my 16th year of marriage?" "Yes," Olivia said. "I'm sorry. I know exactly what I'm asking, and I'm asking anyway because there are 2,000 retired teachers in the Halverson Fund, and none of them have ever heard of you, and every one of them is about to be inside a company that legally cannot operate." Claire looked at the folder on the counter. 15 years old. Corners soft. "I terminated the license this morning," she said. I offered a new one, same terms. Nobody has to lose anything. It's already fixed, Olivia. It's already solved. I solved it before you called. Ma'am, so take your case and go find a real criminal because I have handled this. Mrs. Parker, Olivia's voice went very gentle, which was somehow worse. You can't license away last night. Claire stopped. What? Your license fixes today. It fixes tomorrow. It cannot fix 940 last night when he signed a document swearing to something that wasn't true in front of a fund with pension money in it. A pause. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I truly am. The crime is finished. It's done. It's in the past tense, and neither of us can reach it. At 9:09, the receiver made a sound against Claire's ear, and she realized it was her own hand shaking. You're saying I can't save him. I'm saying he closed that round 11 hours ago, while you were lying in the dark next to him, listening to him breathe, Olivia said. And there was never a version of this morning where you could have. At 9:11 in the conference room, Margaret Reed slid a document down the length of a very long table, and it stopped in front of Gerald Vance, and Gerald read 4 lines of it, took off his glasses, and put a hand over his mouth. Mr. Vance, Margaret said, take your time. There's no rush. It's only the whole company. At 9:12, Ethan said, That's my wife's lawyer. I'm aware of whose lawyer I am. Gerald, look at me. That is my wife's lawyer, and she is sitting in a closed board meeting of a private company, and I want to know who let her in the building. I did, Gerald said. You? I did, Ethan. Gerald put his glasses back on. At 6:15 this morning. She called my house at 5:40 and read me one paragraph, and I have not been able to eat since. At 9:13, Ethan Parker said the sentence that ended him. This is a mistake. I built this company. And Margaret Reed, 71 years old, 2 dead husbands, 40 years of watching men say exactly that, folded her hands on the table and said, Mr. Parker, would you like to say that again? Because I'd like the minutes to have it clean. At 9:14 in the kitchen, Claire said, What happens to him? That's not my call. Guess. Mrs. Parker, Olivia, I have been married to that man since I was 36 years old. Guess. A long breath on the line. Securities fraud, wire fraud, false statements to investors. If it were only the tape, he'd pay a fine and get barred from serving as an officer, and he'd write a book in 4 years about resilience. A pause. It's not only the tape. It's the 2018 email. That email turns 8 years of every filing into a knowing misstatement, and knowing is the whole ballgame. Knowing is the difference between a fine and a sentence. Claire didn't say anything. Ma'am, do you understand what I'm telling you? He didn't destroy himself yesterday in that office. He destroyed himself in 2018 in 11 minutes on a phone, probably in a car, because he was so completely certain of you that he couldn't be bothered to type more than 9 words. She'd never use it, Claire said. That's the whole case, Olivia said. That's it. That's the entire government's case against your husband in 5 words written by him about you. At 9:16, Claire started laughing and couldn't stop, and it turned into something else, and Olivia Chen stood in a stairwell on the 38th floor and listened to a woman come apart 3 miles away and did not say one word because she'd been doing this for 9 years, and she knew that the only decent thing you can do at that moment is stay on the line. At 9:18, Claire said, I'm sorry. Don't. I'm not this. Mrs. Parker, I've watched 4 men in this job find out. Grown men. One of them threw a chair through a window. You're doing fine. At 9:19, Claire wiped her face with the back of her wrist and said, Ask me. Ma'am. You called to ask me something. Nobody's asked me for anything in 15 years without dressing it up first, so don't, just ask me. The pause was short this time. Claire Elizabeth Morgan, Olivia said, will you testify that you are the author of the core technology of Parker Global Solutions? At 9:20 in the conference room, Gerald Vance said, Ethan, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think about your answer, because there are 11 people at this table, and every one of them is going to remember it. Gerald, did you create the technology this company runs on? At 9:20 in a kitchen, Claire Morgan looked at a folder with soft corners. There's a comment in the source, she said. Ma'am, buried in the initializer. Nobody in that building knows who wrote it. There's a boy in engineering, Marcus 26. He thinks it's a legend. Her voice steadied. It says for E, because you believed me first. I know, Olivia said. I've read it 400 times. You have? Mrs. Parker, I found it in January. It's the reason I knew he was lying before I had a single piece of paper. A beat. I sat in my car in that garage and I read one line of a comment written at 3:44 in the morning by somebody who was so in love and so tired and so happy, and then I went upstairs and listened to a man take credit for it at a staff meeting, and I want you to know that whatever happens today, I have been on your side since the second week of January. At 9:21, Claire said, yes. Ma'am. Yes, I'll testify. Mrs. Parker, on one condition. I can't promise. You can promise this one. Claire's voice had gone somewhere new, somewhere flat and clear and 15 years overdue. Nobody else in that building goes down for him. Not Gerald, not Dana, who told me the door doesn't latch, not Marcus, who's 26 and thinks a piece of source code is a miracle, not Walter, who took a pot roast home yesterday and didn't ask me one single question. Ma'am, I'm not finished. Claire stood up. I have the key. I have the timestamp. I have 15 years of every design document in a fireproof box, and none of it exists without me. So you can have all of it, Olivia. Every page. But you take him. Only him. He doesn't get to bring anyone with him because that's what he does. That's what he's always done. He stands on people and calls it climbing. The line was quiet. I'll take it to my supervisor at 10, Olivia said. I think she says yes. Why? Because we don't want 1,100 people, Olivia said. We never did. We wanted the man who said 6 days. At 9:23 in the conference room, Ethan Parker sat in a chair he had sat in for 9 years and looked at 11 faces he had chosen personally, and every one of them was already gone. Ethan, Gerald said. The question. You know what the answer is. I know what the answer is. I want to hear you say it. Why? Because I gave you 9 years, Gerald Vance said, and his voice broke, and he did not apologize for it. Because I defended you in this room in 2016 when everybody wanted you out. Because my daughter interned here. Because you sat at my table at Christmas and told my wife the story about the 6 days, and she cried, Ethan. She cried, and she has told that story to strangers. He took off his glasses again. So you're going to say it out loud, and I'm going to sit here and hear it, because I've earned that much. At 9:24, Ethan Parker said no. No what? No, I didn't create it. Nobody in that room moved. Then who did? At 9:25 in a kitchen 3 miles away, Claire Morgan said into a telephone, Is he in there right now? Yes, ma'am. Are they asking him? Yes, ma'am. Will he say it? I don't know, Olivia said. At 9:25, Ethan Parker put both hands flat on a conference table, and for the first time in 15 years, in front of 11 people and a lawyer and a court reporter that Margaret Reed had brought and paid for out of her own pocket, he said his wife's name like it belonged to a person. Claire, he said. Claire wrote it. Claire wrote all of it. Claire wrote every line of the thing this entire company is. At 9:26, the vote took 90 seconds. At 9:28, Gerald Vance said, Ethan Parker is suspended as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately pending the outcome of the federal inquiry. Security's outside. I'm sorry, I truly am. At 9:29, Ethan said, Gerald, please. Don't. 9 years. Yes, Gerald said, 9 years, and you never once told me her name. At 9:41, Ethan Parker walked out of a building with his name on it carrying a box, and 1,100 people watched, and not one of them said a word, and the silence of that lobby would follow him for the rest of his life. Walter held the door. Walter. Ethan's eyes were red. Walter, listen. Mr. Parker. They're saying things. They're saying things about my wife, about the technology, and I need somebody in this building to... Mr. Parker, Walter said, yesterday your wife gave me a pot roast. Ethan stopped. She stood right there, Walter said, in a blue dress at 12:02 in the afternoon, and she handed me a bag with her hands shaking, and she said, Give some to your granddaughter. Tell her it's from a friend. He let go of the door. 11 years I've held this door for you. Not one time did you ask me my granddaughter's name. Walter. It's Simone, Walter said. Good luck, Mr. Parker. At 10:15, Ethan called Olivia from a parking garage. She let it ring 3 times. Sir, Olivia, thank God. Listen, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask questions. Okay? There's a box in my office. Bottom left drawer. It's locked, the keys in the... Sir, the keys in the pen cup, and I need you to get it out of that building before... Sir, stop talking. Something in her voice. Olivia. Mr. Parker, this call is being recorded, and I'm required to tell you that. At 10:16, Ethan Parker heard his own heart in his ears. What? My name is Olivia Chen. I'm a forensic investigator on contract to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I've been in your office since November 11th. Everything you've said to me since November 11th has been on a recorded line and preserved. A pause. Including the part about the drawer, which I would very strongly advise you to stop talking about right now, because you're currently doing more damage in 90 seconds than you did in 8 months. At 10:17, there was no sound on the line at all. You? His voice came out wrong. 8 months. Yes. I told you things. Yes, sir, you did. I told you about my father. Ethan's voice cracked wide open. I told you about my father and the transmissions and I told you things I never told your wife, Olivia said. I know, I noticed. Olivia, please. Mr. Parker, I need you to understand something, and then I'm hanging up. Her voice didn't rise either. Nobody in this story ever raised their voice. That was the thing that would haunt him. I was never impressed by you. Not once. Not on day one. You spent 8 months talking to a woman you thought admired you, and I want you to know exactly what I was doing while you talked. Don't. I was typing. At 10:18, Ethan and Parker sat in a parking garage, in a car he no longer had a badge to park in, and understood finally all at once what he had done, that he had betrayed his marriage for a woman who was never there. Spilled 8 months of secrets to a stranger because she nodded, lost a company. He never built and handed the government its entire case in 11 words, typed in a car in 2018 because he was so sure of his wife that he couldn't be bothered to be afraid of her. She's going to testify, he said. Isn't she? Sir, just tell me, is Claire going to testify? Olivia Chen looked out a stairwell window at a gray Seattle morning. Mr. Parker, she said. Your wife's first condition before she said one word about you was that nobody else in your building goes down. What? She named 4 people. Do you know which 4? Olivia, Gerald, Dana, a 26-year-old engineer named Marcus, and a man in your lobby named Walter. A pause. She was crying when she said it, and she still remembered all 4 names. You couldn't remember one. At 10:20, the line went dead, and Ethan Parker put his forehead against a steering wheel and made a sound in a concrete garage that nobody heard. At 2:40 that afternoon, Claire's landline rang. She almost didn't answer it. Hello, Mrs. Parker, a young man's voice shaking. It's Marcus Whitfield, from engineering, from the hallway with the monitors. I almost ran you over. I remember. Ma'am, He stopped. She could hear him trying. I've been sitting in my car for 4 hours. Marcus? I told you not to let them touch it, he said. Do you remember I stood there and I told you there's a legend about who wrote the Colonel, and some guys say Parker wrote it in a weekend, and you looked at me and said, don't let them touch it. And I said, yes, ma'am, like you were somebody's mom who wandered onto the floor. Marcus, I read the comment out loud to you. His voice broke completely. I read your own comment out loud to you. To your face, like it was a fun little story. Claire closed her eyes. Marcus, listen to me. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. Listen to me. She waited until he stopped. Do you know how long I've waited for somebody in that building to say that thing was a miracle? Silence. 15 years, Claire said. I waited 15 years, and yesterday a boy in a hallway said it to my face without knowing who I was, and it's the only time anyone has ever said it, and I'm going to carry that until I die. So don't you apologize to me. Mrs. Parker. Marcus. Ma'am? The routing colonel's still holding at 99.9. She heard him laugh through it, wet and ruined. Yes, ma'am. Good, Claire said. Come to work tomorrow. He didn't come home that night. At 11:50, Claire heard a car in the driveway and stood up so fast she knocked the folder off the counter, and then the car backed out again and drove away, and she sat back down and discovered she had been holding her breath for something she didn't want. At 12:04, Bernadette called. "Are you alone?" "Yes. I'm 4 hours away. I'm getting in the car." "Bernie, no. Claire Elizabeth. If you come here, I will hold it together for you," Claire said. "And I don't have the strength to hold it together for anybody right now, so please, please stay in Spokane and let me be a mess in my own kitchen." The line was quiet for a while. "Okay," Bernadette said. "Okay, honey." "Bernie?" "Yeah." He knew for 7 years. "I heard. Margaret called me." 7 years, Bernie. He knew I could end him at any hour of any day for 7 years, and he never even locked the door. He went to sleep next to me. Every night. For 7 years. Claire. Do you understand what that means? Tell me what it means. "It means he trusted me completely," Claire said, and started to cry. "That's the thing nobody's going to understand. He wasn't afraid of me because he trusted me. That's the only true thing he's ever felt about me, and it's the exact same thing as not seeing me at all. It's the same, Bernie. It came out of the same place. He trusted me the way you trust a wall." At 12:11, Bernadette Morgan said the truest thing anyone said all week. "Yeah," she said. "And walls hold the whole house up, and nobody thanks a wall, and then one day it moves." At 6:20 the next morning, the story broke. Not the local station, not a business blog. It was the Times. It was above the fold, and it was 3,000 words long, and it had been written in 11 hours by a woman who had clearly not slept, and the headline said, "The Other Parker." At 6:40, Claire's cell had 91 messages. At 6:41, Margaret called the landline. "Don't read the comments. Margaret, I'm serious. Don't read one. Not one Claire, not a single one, because you will read 400 people calling you a hero, and you will find the one who calls you a gold digger, and you will think about that one until Christmas. I've seen it. Don't." Who talked? Nobody talked. That's the beautiful part. Margaret sounded almost gleeful. A reporter pulled the trust filing off a public docket at 4 a.m. because the SEC opened a formal inquiry at midnight, and the docket is public and your name is on it in 11-point type. Nobody leaked. He filed it himself in 2011, and it sat in a drawer for 15 years, and the state of Washington finally read it out loud. He's going to think I did it. Let him. Margaret. Claire, that man's opinion of you cost you 15 years. It's the most expensive thing you've ever owned. Put it down. At 8:05, Dana called. "Mrs. Parker, it's Dana from the desk." "Dana, I have your number. I've had it for 2 years. It's in the system under personal do not use." Claire almost laughed. "That's about right." "Ma'am," Dana's voice went thin. "I have to tell you something, and I've been up all night about it." "Okay." "I knew." "You knew what, sweetheart?" "I knew he was—" She stopped, started again. "Not the woman. I never thought there was a woman. Honestly, I'd have told you. I swear to God, I'd have told you. But the other thing, the way he talked about you." A breath. 2 years, Mrs. Parker. 2 years I heard how he talked about you when the door was closed, and I typed his calendar, and I answered the phone when you called, and I said he's in meetings, and he was not always in meetings. And I knew. And I said nothing. Because I make $61,000 a year, and I have student loans, and I told myself it wasn't my business. "Dana, I'm going to quit today. I just wanted to say it to you first." "Dana, stop." "Ma'am, you told me the door doesn't latch." Silence. "Do you know what that was?" Claire said. "You had 1 second. You were 26 years old with a chair still spinning behind you, and you had 1 second to choose, and you chose me, and it cost you everything you thought you had, and you did it anyway." "Mrs. Parker." "You are not quitting," Claire said. "Come to work." At 9:15, Ethan called from a number she didn't know. She let it ring. At 9:16, he called again. At 9:17, the landline rang, and she picked it up because he'd gone and found the one number that meant he'd finally understood something. "Claire, where are you?" "The Kimpton, room 408. He sounded like he'd been sanded down. "Claire, please don't hang up. 60 seconds, please." "Talk." "There are 11 news trucks on our street." "I know. I made coffee for 2 of them." "You—" A pause. "What?" "It was cold, Ethan. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if there had been anything left in him to laugh with. "Of course you did," he said. "Of course you did. 50 seconds. Claire, I need to see you. No. One time, not a lawyer, not the board, I know it's coming. Gerald called me. I know I'm going to be sitting across a table from federal attorneys in 3 weeks, and you're going to be on the other side of it, and I'm not asking you for that. I'm not asking you to stop it. I couldn't stop it. I know that." "Then what are you asking?" "I want to sit in a room with you," Ethan said, "one time before I'm a person you have to talk about in the past tense." At 9:19, Claire closed her eyes and made the worst decision of the entire week. "Wednesday," she said. 2 o'clock, Margaret's office. She'll be in the room. "Claire, that's the offer, Ethan. Take it or don't. I'll take it." "And Ethan?" "Yeah. Read the article first," she said. "The whole thing, all 3,000 words. Don't skim it looking for your name." At 2 o'clock on Wednesday, Ethan Parker walked into Margaret Reed's conference room, and Margaret Reed did not stand up and did not offer him coffee and did not say hello. "Sit. Margaret. Mr. Parker, I have known you for 15 years, and you have called me Margaret exactly 4 times, all of them in the last 6 days, and I want you to notice that." She opened a legal pad. "Sit down." He sat. At 2:02, Claire came in. He stood up so fast his chair went back. "Claire, sit down, Ethan." He sat. And for maybe 15 seconds, nobody said anything at all, and Claire looked at a man she had known since she was 36, and saw for the first time in years what he actually looked like. "You've lost weight," she said. "I can't eat." "That's not what I meant." At 2:04, Ethan said, "I read it." "Okay." 4 times. I read it 4 times. His hands were flat on the table and they weren't steady. "Claire, there's a part in there, the reporter got it from Carnegie Mellon from a professor. He's 81 years old, and he still had the file. Do you know what he said about you? Ethan. He said you were the best applicant he saw in 34 years of teaching," Ethan said. "He said he called you personally. He said he'd never called an applicant personally before and never did again. And he said you told him no, and he asked why, and you said, 'Don't.' You said my husband's building something." At 2:05, Claire Morgan put a hand over her mouth. "Claire, don't you do that?" Her voice came out wrong. "Don't you sit there and read my life back to me like you just found it. You were in the room, Ethan. You were in the room when I made that call. You were standing in the kitchen and you said, 'Are you sure?' And I said, 'Yes.' And you said, 'Okay,' and you went to get your dry cleaning." Ethan Parker put his face in his hands. "I don't remember that," he said. "I know you don't." "Claire, I swear to God I don't remember that at all." "I know," Claire said. "That's the entire problem. That's every single thing that's happened this week right there in one sentence." At 2:08, he tried the only thing he had left. "I loved you." Margaret's pen stopped moving. And Claire, who had rehearsed this in the car, who had a speech, who had 11 things she'd been carrying since a hallway on a Wednesday, didn't use any of it. "I know you did," she said. "Then, that's what makes it unforgivable, Ethan. Claire, if you'd hated me, I could work with that. If you'd been cruel, if you'd been cold, if you'd wanted the money, if there'd been a woman, a real one, a woman in a hotel, I could hold that in my hands and look at it and know what it was." Her voice didn't rise. "But you loved me. You loved me the whole time. You loved me at 3:44 in the morning while I wrote the thing that paid for your life, and you were asleep, and I let you sleep. Claire, you didn't betray me because you found someone better." He looked up. "You betrayed me," Claire said, "because you never once thought I was a person who could leave." At 2:10, Ethan Parker started to cry, and it was ugly, and Margaret Reed did not look away, because Margaret Reed had waited 15 years for this, and she intended to be present for all of it. "I never said the words," he said. "Claire, I swear on my mother I never sat there and thought, 'You wrote 9 of them.'" He stopped. "It's fine. It's Claire. She'd never use it." "Oh, God." "Bury it in the appendix and let's move." Claire's hands were shaking on the table and she let them. "You had 7 years, Ethan. You had 7 years of knowing exactly what I was holding, and you never had one bad night about it. Not one. You slept every single night for 7 years next to a woman who could end you with a signature, and you weren't afraid because you weren't looking at me. You were looking at a thing you owned. That's not... Then explain it. I can't. Try. At 2:13, Ethan Parker said the truest sentence of his life. Because you never asked me for anything, he said. Not once, in 15 years. And I let that mean you didn't need anything. The room was very still. And it was easier, he said. Claire, that's it. That's the whole thing. It was easier. Every day it was easier to believe you were fine than to ask. And I did that for 5,000 days. And by the end, I wasn't lying to you. I'd have passed a polygraph. I had genuinely made you into somebody who was fine. Claire nodded slowly. There it is, she said. Claire. You know what I keep thinking about, she said. The Colonel. Not the money. The Colonel. There's a boy in your building, Marcus, and he called it a miracle to my face and didn't know who I was, and it was the single best moment of my professional life, and I got it from a stranger in a hallway. She looked at him. Ethan, you were the only other person alive who knew. For 15 years you were the only witness I had, and you didn't just take the credit, you forgot there was anything to take. Claire, please. Do you know what a witness is? She said. That's what a marriage is. That's all it is. Somebody who was there, somebody who saw. And I gave you 15 years of the only thing I've ever been proud of, and you were asleep for all of it, and now there's nobody left who saw. Ethan Parker couldn't speak. At 2:17, Margaret Reed said very quietly, Mr. Parker, I'd like to say one thing, and then I'll be silent. Margaret. March 4th, 2011. My office, 11 in the morning. He looked at her. You signed page 11 without reading it, Margaret said. And I have thought about that morning approximately once a month for 15 years, and do you know why? Because I watched you do it. I watched you sign away the entire foundation of your life in 9 seconds because you had a lunch, and I remember thinking this man isn't a thief. A thief would have read it. Then what am I? You're a man who never believed his wife was a person who might one day be standing somewhere he couldn't see. At 2:20, Ethan asked the question, Are you going to testify? Claire didn't hesitate. Yes. He nodded. He'd known. He'd known since a parking garage. Okay. That's it. Okay. What do you want me to say, Claire? He wiped his face with the flat of his hand. You wrote it. That's the whole testimony. You're going to sit in a room and say a true thing. I've been screaming for 15 years, and the only person who ever told the truth about that company is going to say 4 sentences and it'll be over. He laughed, and it was terrible. That's not revenge. That's just the record getting fixed. Ethan. Yeah. There's one more thing, and I need you to hear it from me and not from a lawyer. Okay? At 2:23, Claire said, I gave them a condition. I heard. Gerald, Dana, Marcus, Walter. He almost smiled, and it was the saddest thing in the room. Walter. His granddaughter's name is Simone. I know that now. Ethan pressed his thumbs into his eyes. I know it now. They said yes, Claire said. The whole building stays clean, every one of them. 1,100 people, Ethan, and not one of them goes down with you. Good. You don't understand what I'm telling you. He looked up. Everybody's protected, Claire said. That's the shape of it now. There's exactly one person in this entire thing standing by himself with nothing around him. At 2:25, Ethan Parker understood. Me. You. And that's... He stopped. Swallowed. Claire, is that what you wanted? No, Claire said. That's what you built. At 2:27, he said, how long? Margaret, that's not my area, Margaret said, but I've been doing this a long time, and I'll tell you what I'd tell a client. With the 2018 email, you're not fighting whether. You're fighting how long. Cooperation matters. Restitution matters. And there's one thing that matters more than either. What? Whether you make her sit in that chair, Margaret said. At 2:28, the room went absolutely silent. What? You heard me. Margaret. You have a right to a trial, Mr. Parker. And if you take it, Claire sits in a witness box for 2 days, and 11 federal attorneys make her explain line by line in public, on the record, how she built the thing you took while you sit 12 feet away, and every reporter in this country writes about the marriage. Margaret closed her legal pad. That's your right. Nobody can take it from you. That's the last thing you own. At 2:30, Ethan Parker looked at his wife. Claire, don't. Claire, look at me. She looked at him. I'm not going to make you sit in that chair, he said. At 2:31, Claire Morgan felt something in her chest crack that had been holding since Wednesday at 11:58. Ethan, I'm going to plead. His voice was steady, and she'd never heard it steady like that, not in 15 years, not in a single interview or keynote or investor call. I'll take whatever they want, whatever number. I'm not going to sit in a courtroom and make you prove you exist. I've done that to you for 15 years. You don't know what they'll ask for. I don't care. Ethan, they could ask for. Claire. He leaned forward. It's the only thing left I can give you. Do you get that? Everything else I have I took from you. The company, the tower, the name on the front, my whole entire life, you made all of it, and I have been walking around inside it, calling it mine. His hands opened on the table. This is the one thing that's actually mine to give. It's the only thing in 15 years I ever brought to this marriage. Claire couldn't breathe. That's not a gift, she said. I know. Ethan, that's not a gift, that's the bill. I know, Ethan Parker said. I'm paying it. At 2:35, he stood up. Claire, yeah. One question, and then I'll go, and I won't call the house again. Okay. The comment, he said, in the source, for E, because you believed me first. Claire went very still. That's me, he said. E, that's me. Yes. When did you write it? 3:44 in the morning, Claire said. November 9th, 2010, you were on the couch. You had a breakfast. Ethan Parker stood in a conference room and put a hand on the back of a chair to hold himself up. You believed me first, he said. I believed you first. And you never read it, Claire said. At 2:37, he walked to the door and stopped and did not turn around. Claire, Ethan, 15 years ago, I stood up in front of 200 people and said I'd never let you feel ordinary a single day of your life. I remember. Aunt Ruth cried into a napkin. She did. I meant it, he said. That's the part that's going to kill me. I meant every word of it. And I said it, and then I went home and I spent 15 years doing the exact opposite of it, and I never noticed once. Claire didn't answer. You were the smartest person I ever met, Ethan said, and I made you into a woman who calls a receptionist 3 times a week. And then he opened the door. Ethan. He stopped. Claire's voice came out of somewhere she didn't recognize. Go be brilliant, she said. He put his forehead against the doorframe for a second. Just one. Then he left. At 2:44, Margaret Reed poured 2 fingers of something out of a bottle in her desk drawer and pushed one across to Claire, who didn't drink, and took it anyway. You okay? No. Good, Margaret said. That was the right answer. Claire held the glass with both hands. He's going to prison, isn't he? Probably. Margaret. Claire, look at me. Margaret leaned across the desk. You did not do that. I need you to hear that in a room where somebody who loves you is saying it out loud because you're going to spend the next 20 years arguing with yourself about it at 4 a.m. She tapped the desk. You didn't do it in a hallway. You didn't do it with a signature. He did it in 11 minutes in 2018 on a phone, and the reason he did it is that he was so certain of you that he couldn't be bothered to be careful. That's not your crime. That's his. He said he'd plead. I heard. Margaret, he could have made me testify. He could have dragged me through. He had that. He had that, and he put it down. Margaret Reed was quiet a moment. Yes, she said. He did. So what does that make him? It makes him a man who did one decent thing at the end of a very long stretch of not doing them, Margaret said. And you're allowed to notice it. You're allowed to be sad about it. You're allowed to sit in your car and cry about a man who's going to federal prison for 8 years and still love the 26-year-old boy in an apartment with a broken radiator who believed you when nobody else did. She sat back. You're allowed all of it, Claire. Just don't you dare go back. At 3:10, Claire's phone rang in the parking lot. Mrs. Parker? Olivia. He called our office an hour ago. Olivia sounded like she'd been running. Through counsel. He's offering full cooperation and a plea, no trial. He waived ma'am, he waived everything. He waived it before we'd even made an offer. My supervisor's never seen that. Claire sat in her car with her hand over her eyes. I know, she said. Ma'am, I have to ask you something, and you don't have to answer. Ask. Why? Olivia said. Why would he do that? Guys like him fight. They always fight. They fight for 4 years and they write a book. Why did he do that? At 3:12, Claire Morgan looked through a windshield at a gray Seattle afternoon. Because it's the only thing he ever had that he didn't take from me, she said. At 6:30 that evening, Claire drove home, and there were no news trucks left, and the house was very quiet, and she went upstairs, and she did not go to the small room at the end of the hall. She went to their bedroom. His watch was on the nightstand where he'd left it Thursday morning. Claire sat on the edge of the bed and picked it up and held it in both hands for a long time. Then she put it in the drawer and closed the drawer and went downstairs and called her sister. Bernie. Hey, honey. He's pleading. I know, Margaret called. Bernie, Claire's voice went. I don't know who I am if I'm not the woman who protects him. I've been doing it since 2009. I don't know how to be anything else. I'm 51 years old and I built a machine that runs a company, and I don't know what I do on Thursday. Bernadette Morgan was quiet. Claire? Yeah. Come home. Bernie. Not forever. 2 weeks. Come to Spokane and sleep in the room you grew up in and eat something I made and don't answer a single telephone. A pause. You've been holding a ladder for 15 years, honey. You're allowed to put your arms down for 2 weeks before you find out what you climb. At 8:40, Claire packed a bag. At 8:52, she stopped in the kitchen and picked up the gray folder and stood there with it. Then she put it in the bag, too, because it was hers. Because it had always, from the very first line at 3:44 in the morning on November 9th, 2010, in an apartment with a broken radiator, been hers. She lasted 9 days in Spokane. On the first morning, Bernadette made eggs and didn't ask her one question, and Claire sat at the same kitchen table she'd done her homework at in 1988 and cried into her sleeve for 20 minutes while her sister washed a pan and hummed and led her. On the third morning, Bernadette said, You're going to have to say something eventually. About what? About anything, Claire. You've said 40 words in 3 days. You said more than that to the mailman. The mailman didn't want anything. Neither do I. Everybody wants something, Claire said, and then heard herself and put her fork down. God, listen to me. I'm listening to you, Bernadette said. It's the first true thing you've said since you got here. At 9:20 on this fourth morning, Margaret called. How's Spokane? Small. Good. Stay there. A rustle of paper. The board wants a meeting. No. Claire. Margaret, I said no. I know what you said. I'm telling you what they said, and then I'm going to hang up, and then you're going to think about it for 4 days and call me back and say yes, because I've known you since you were 36, and that's how you do everything. Claire looked out her sister's window at a street she'd learned to ride a bike on. What do they want? They accepted the license, unanimously, 9 minutes. I know that. That was 2 weeks ago. That's not what the meeting's about. Margaret paused. Claire, condition 2. Margaret, appointment of the trustee to the board of directors. You wrote that, in your kitchen, at 10 o'clock at night with my pen. I wrote it to hurt him. Did you? Yes. Say it again with a straight face. Claire didn't say anything. That's what I thought, Margaret said. They meet Tuesday. Gerald asked me personally. He said, and I'm quoting a 64-year-old man who I'm fairly sure was crying, he said, tell her we've been running her company for 15 years without her permission, and we'd like to start asking. At 9:24, Claire hung up and sat on her sister's porch for 2 hours. At 11:40, Bernadette came out with a coffee and didn't offer it, just set it on the rail beside her. Board seat? How do you know that? Because Margaret called me first, Bernadette said. Obviously. Bernie. Oh, don't act surprised that woman has been managing you like a portfolio since 2011. She sat down on the step. You going to take it? No. Why not? Because I don't know how to be in a room like that. Claire. I don't. Bernie, I'm not being modest. I'm telling you a fact about myself. I know how to solve things. I know how to sit alone at a table at 4 a.m. and make something work that shouldn't work. I've never once had to convince anybody of anything. That was his job. That was the whole arrangement. She wrapped her hands around the mug. I built a machine and he built a story, and the story is what they bought. Bernadette was quiet a second. Can I say something mean? When has that ever stopped you? That's the smartest thing you've ever said, and it's also completely full of it, Bernadette said. You want to know why? Because you convinced somebody once. You convinced a 27-year-old kid with holes in his shoes that a thing nobody had ever built could be built, and you did it so well that he spent 15 years believing he'd thought of it himself. She stood up. You didn't fail to convince anybody, honey. You succeeded so completely you disappeared. At 6:15 on the 9th evening, Claire packed the bag. That's it. 9 days. I was promised 2 weeks. Bernie, I know. Bernadette folded her arms in a doorway. Go. At 8:50 Tuesday morning, Claire Morgan walked into the lobby of a building with her husband's name on the front of it, and Walter came around the desk so fast he knocked over a cup of pens. Mrs. Parker. It's Morgan, she said. It's always been Morgan, actually, on everything legal. He never noticed that either. Walter looked at her for a second. Then he laughed. Out loud, hard in a marble lobby, the first laugh anybody had gotten out of that building in 3 weeks. Ms. Morgan. Hi, Walter. Ma'am, I've got to say a thing, and if I don't say it now, I'm going to lose the nerve. Say it. 11 years I stood at that desk, Walter said. And every time you came through that door, I thought to myself, that is the nicest woman who has ever walked into this building, and what a shame it is that she married that man. Walter. And I was wrong, he said. You're not the nicest woman who ever walked into this building. You're the one who built it. And I've been telling everybody that for 3 weeks, and I'm not going to stop. Claire's throat closed. How's Simone? Walter's face did something. He had to look at the ceiling for a second. She's 9, he said. She asked me if the lady who made the roast was on the news. I said, yes, baby, that's her. His voice cracked. She said, Grandpa, did you know she was smart? And I said, honey, everybody knew she was kind. Nobody bothered to find out she was smart. And I said, don't you ever let that happen to you. At 8:54, Claire Morgan stood in a lobby and cried in front of a security guard and did not care one bit. At 8:58, the elevator doors opened on 41, and Dana was standing there, and she had clearly been standing there for a while. Ma'am? Dana, I'm not at the desk today. I asked to not be at the desk today. I wanted to be here when the doors opened. She was gripping a tablet like a life raft. Is that weird? That's weird. It's not weird. Everybody's out there. What? On the floor. Dana swallowed. I want to warn you, nobody organized it. I want you to know that because it looks organized and it isn't. Marcus came in at 6, and then like 4 engineers came in at 6:30, and then people just kept coming. Ma'am, sales came in. Sales doesn't come in before 9 for anything. Dana, they just want to see you, Dana said. That's all. Nobody's going to say anything. They just want to be standing there when you walk by, because for 15 years the person who made the thing they work on was a story, and now she's a woman in a coat, and they need to see it with their own eyes. At 9 o'clock, Claire Morgan walked down a hallway that curved to the left, past an office with a door that didn't latch, and 1,100 people did not applaud because Dana had told them not to, because Dana knew her. They just stood up. Every floor, every desk, in total silence. And Claire, who had spent 15 years being the person nobody looked at, walked the length of that floor with her chin up and her hands shaking and did not break once. At 9:04 in the conference room, Gerald Vance stood. Ms. Morgan? Gerald. I've got a speech. Gerald. I wrote it at 2 in the morning and my wife read it and said it was terrible, and I'm going to give it anyway, he said. Because if I don't get through it, I'm going to have to carry it around for the rest of my life. Okay. Gerald Vance put both hands on the back of his chair. I sat in this room for 9 years, he said, and I asked that man 10,000 questions. I asked him about burn rate. I asked him about head count. I asked him about margin, about the Series C, about the Lisbon keynote, about whether we should have a second data center. He stopped. I never once asked him who wrote it. Nobody moved. Nobody asks that, he went on. That's the thing I can't get past. 11 of us in this room, $400 million, and not one person in 15 years said out loud, "Where did this actually come from?" We didn't miss it. We didn't get fooled. Ms. Morgan, we didn't ask, and there's a difference. And the difference is the only thing I've thought about for 3 weeks. Gerald, I'm not done. Okay. Page 11, Gerald said. It was on page 11 the whole time, of a document in our own file room. I've read that document 6 times. 6. And I read past your name 6 times because the license was in perpetuity, and perpetuity means don't worry about it. He took his glasses off. That's what your marriage was, wasn't it? Perpetuity. It's a word that means a man can stop reading. At 9:09, Claire Morgan sat down at a conference table for the first time in her life. "Can I say something?" "Please. I'm not angry at this room," she said. Somebody made a small sound. "I mean that. I've had 3 weeks to be angry at this room and I couldn't get there." She folded her hands. "You want to know why?" "Because I did the same thing. I looked past me too. For 15 years I sat in a house and I read articles about my own work, and I never once said, 'That's mine.' Not to a reporter, not to a friend, not to my sister, and she's known me since I had a lisp." A pause. "I didn't have a lisp." Somebody laughed. It was the first crack in the room. "I trained you," Claire said. "All of you. Every single person in this building learned how to not see me from watching how I didn't see myself. So no, I'm not angry at you. You just believed the woman when she told you she was nobody." At 9:12, Gerald Vance sat down heavily. "That's worse," he said. "Yes," Claire said. "It usually is." At 9:14, they voted. It took 40 seconds. At 9:15, Gerald said, "Ms. Morgan, welcome to the board." And 11 people applauded, and Claire looked at the table and let them. At 9:22, the room started to empty, and Gerald said, "One more thing." And everybody stopped. "There's an item," he said. "It's not on the agenda. I put it in my pocket instead of on the agenda because I wanted to ask her privately, and Margaret told me if I did that, she'd have my liver." "Gerald, they want you to run it." At 9:23, Claire Morgan said, "No. Ms. Morgan, no." "You haven't heard the, Gerald." She stood up. "I want to be extremely clear because I don't want this coming back in 6 months. No, I'm not doing it. I'm not sitting in that office." "Why?" "Because that office is where he told a stranger I was comfortable being his wife," Claire said. "And I am not going to spend the rest of my life proving I'm not." The room went dead quiet. "That's what he'd want," she said. "Do you understand that if I take that chair, then he's still the measurement? Every day for the rest of my career, I'd be answering him, and I'm done answering him. I answered him for 15 years. At 9:25, Gerald Vance said the thing nobody expected. "Then what do you want?" At 9:26, Claire Morgan discovered she had absolutely no idea. At 11:40, she found herself standing on the engineering floor without exactly deciding to. "Ma'am." Marcus Whitfield came around a pillar and nearly dropped a laptop. "Ma'am, hi, sorry, are you lost? Do you need Dana? Said you were upstairs. I didn't think you'd—" "Marcus." "Yes, ma'am." "Show me the colonel." Marcus Whitfield stopped moving entirely. "Ma'am, show it to me." "You," he blinked. "Ms. Morgan, you wrote it." "I wrote it in 2010, Claire said. "I haven't looked at it since 2013. I've spent 13 years being told at dinner parties what my own work does." At 11:44, Marcus pulled up a chair for her and then didn't know what to do with his hands. At 11:46, Claire Morgan read her own code for the first time in 13 years. At 11:49, she said, "Oh, ma'am, you wrapped it." Marcus swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "You didn't touch it. You wrapped it." She scrolled. "Somebody built a shim around the whole allocation path, so they'd never have to modify the initializer." "That was me," Marcus said quietly. 4 years ago. I got yelled at for it. 2 weeks of work I could have done in 3 days if I'd just gone in and changed it." "Why didn't you—" Marcus Whitfield looked at his shoes. "Because of the comment," he said. At 11:51, Claire Morgan put her hand over her mouth. "Ma'am, say that again. It's stupid." "Marcus, it's okay." He scrubbed a hand through his hair. I was 22. It was my second month, and I opened that file to change it, and the first thing at the top of the initializer is somebody saying 4E, because you believed me first. And I sat there at midnight, and I thought somebody was in love when they wrote this. He shrugged, miserable, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't put my name on top of that. So I wrote around it, and I got yelled at, and I did it again the next year. And by now there's basically a religion about it downstairs. 4 separate people have been told not to touch the initializer by 4 other people who were told not to touch it, and none of them know why. At 11:53, Claire Morgan started to laugh and couldn't stop, and then she wasn't laughing. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Marcus, listen to me." "Yes, ma'am." 15 years, she said. 15 years I thought that line was in a grave. I thought I'd written a note to a man who was asleep, and it went into a file and it died there, and it was the loneliest thing I've ever done. Her voice went to pieces. "And you're telling me that 400 engineers have been protecting it since 2012 because a 22-year-old couldn't bring himself to write over a love letter." Marcus Whitfield, 26 years old, stood in the middle of an engineering floor and cried in front of his entire team. "Yes, ma'am," he said. At 11:56, Claire said, "Who else has read it?" "Everybody," Marcus said. "Everybody, ma'am. It's the first thing they show you. It's in the onboarding doc as a joke, like, here's the sacred comment, don't touch the sacred comment." They read it out loud. "There's a thing at the Christmas party," Marcus said. "It's dumb. Somebody reads it out at midnight." At 11:57, Claire Morgan learned that for 13 years in a building she'd never worked in a room full of strangers, had been reading her love letter out loud every December while her husband stood in the corner talking about the 6 days. "Ma'am, are you—" "I'm fine, Marcus." "You're not fine." "No," Claire agreed. "I'm not." At 1:20 that afternoon, in a stairwell on the 38th floor, because she couldn't do it anywhere else, Claire called Olivia Chen. "Mrs.—" A pause. "Ms. Morgan? You heard?" "Ma'am," everybody heard. "It's a lobby with a marble floor, sound travels." "You were there?" "I was in the back," Olivia said. "I'm not supposed to be in that building anymore. I came anyway." "Why?" The pause was long. "Because in 9 years of doing this job," Olivia said, "I've never gotten to see the good part. I show up, I take 400 hours of tape, somebody goes to prison, and then I go home and get a new file. Nobody's ever standing up when I leave." Her voice caught just once. "I wanted to see somebody stand up." At 1:24, Claire said, "How is he?" Olivia didn't answer right away. "Ma'am, I'm not asking as a witness." "I know what you're asking as," Olivia said. "That's the problem." "Olivia," a long breath. "He's cooperating," she said. "Fully, completely. Ms. Morgan, he's cooperating so hard my supervisor thinks it's a strategy, and I've had to tell her twice that it isn't." "How do you know it isn't?" "Because a strategy has a ceiling," Olivia said. "He blew through the ceiling in the second week. He gave us 3 things we didn't have, and one of them we'd never have found, and it added 14 months to his own exposure. And his attorney put it on the record that he advised against it, and he did it anyway." Claire sat down on a concrete step. 14 months. "Yes, ma'am." "He added 14 months to his own—" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" "I asked him," Olivia said. At 1:27, Claire Morgan stopped breathing. "You asked him?" "Off the record, in a hallway. It was probably a mistake." Olivia's voice was very careful now. "I said, 'Mr. Parker, you understand you just handed us 14 months of your own life for nothing.' And he said, 'It's not for nothing.'" "What did he mean?" I said the same thing. I said, "What does that mean?" A pause. And he said, "Every one of those months is a month I don't have to be a man who took something." At 1:29 in a stairwell, Claire Morgan put her forehead on her knees. "Miss Morgan, I'm here. There's more, and I don't know if you want it. Give me all of it." "He asked us to do something," Olivia said. "In the plea. It's not standard. My supervisor had to call DC." "What?" "He asked that the correction go in the judgment," Olivia said. "Not a press release, not a statement. The actual judgment, the paper that gets filed, the thing that exists in the record of the United States forever." A breath. "He wanted a finding of fact, signed by a federal judge, stating that Claire Elizabeth Morgan is the sole author of the core technology of Parker Global Solutions. At 1:31, Claire said, "That's not—" "It doesn't help him," Olivia said. "Ma'am, I want to be extremely clear because I know how your brain works now. It doesn't reduce a day. It doesn't move a number. It's not leverage. It's not mitigation. My supervisor literally said, 'What's he getting for this?' And the answer is nothing." A pause. "He's spending his last piece of paper on your name." At 1:33, Claire Morgan sat on a concrete step in a building she'd built and made a sound she'd only made once before in a hallway at 11:58 in the morning. At 3 o'clock on the 14th of October, in a federal courtroom, Ethan Parker pled guilty to securities fraud and wire fraud. Claire sat in the fourth row. Margaret had told her not to. Bernadette had told her not to. Bernadette had driven 4 hours to tell her not to, and then sat down next to her without another word and held her hand through all of it. At 3:14, the judge asked Ethan Parker if he understood the rights he was giving up. "Yes, Your Honor." "Has anyone threatened you or coerced you into this plea?" "No, Your Honor." "Has anyone promised you anything in exchange?" "No, Your Honor." "Mr. Parker, I wanted to be certain about one item because in 19 years on this bench, I've never had it requested." A rustle of paper. "You've asked the government to include a finding of fact regarding authorship. Do you understand this finding provides you no benefit whatsoever?" At 3:16, Ethan Parker said, "I understand, Your Honor. You understand it may increase your exposure by establishing knowledge." My attorney explained that, Your Honor. "And you're asking for it anyway?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Why, Mr. Parker?" At 3:17, Ethan Parker turned around in a federal courtroom and looked at the fourth row. "Because she wrote it, Your Honor," he said, "and there's no other place left where that gets written down." At 3:18, Bernadette Morgan squeezed her sister's hand so hard it left a mark that lasted 4 days. At 3:40, it was over. At 3:44, and Claire noticed the time, and would notice it every year for the rest of her life, the judge said the number. 68 months. At 3:45, Ethan Parker was permitted to speak before he was remanded. "Your Honor, may I say one thing to my wife? Mr. Parker, that's not—" "Your Honor, please." At 3:46, a 19-year federal judge did something she had never done before and would never do again. "Briefly," she said. Ethan Parker turned around. "Claire!" And Claire Morgan, in the fourth row of a courtroom in Seattle, did not look away. "I read the comment," Ethan said. The whole room went still. "Last week, in a room with my attorney and a laptop, Marcus printed it out and gave it to Olivia, and Olivia gave it to my lawyer, and I sat in a room and I read it for the first time." His voice was steady. It was the steadiest it had ever been in his life. 16 years late. That's the whole story, Your Honor. That's the entire thing. 16 years late. "Mr. Parker." "That's all," Ethan said. "That's it. That's all I wanted to say." At 3:48, they took him. At 3:52, in a hallway outside a federal courtroom with 40 reporters behind a rope and Margaret Reed's hand on her back, Claire Morgan stopped walking. "Claire, keep moving." "Margaret, honey, keep moving. They're not going to—" "Margaret, I want to say something." At 3:53, Margaret Reed, 71 years old, 2 dead husbands, 40 years of telling clients to say nothing, looked at Claire Morgan's face and said, "Then say it." Claire turned around. 40 microphones came up at once. At 3:54, she said 11 sentences that ran on every network in the country by 6 o'clock. "My name is Claire Elizabeth Morgan," she said. "In 2010, in an apartment with a broken radiator, I wrote a routing kernel that has run without failure for 16 years. I did it at a card table. I did it at 3 in the morning. Nobody helped me, and nobody watched me, and for 15 years nobody knew." The hallway was completely silent. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you my husband stole it," she said. "He didn't steal it. I handed it to him. Every day, with both hands. For 15 years, I told a room full of the smartest people in this city that I was nobody, and they believed me because why on earth wouldn't they?" Somebody in the back said, "Ms. Morgan, I'm not finished." They shut up. "There's a woman watching this," Claire said. "Probably a lot of them. She's 50-something. She's in a kitchen. She's got a landline in the wall because it's the only thing in the house he didn't redecorate. And somewhere in her house there's a folder with her name on it. A degree, a patent, a manuscript, a business. She started in 1994, something there's always something, and she spent 30 years telling herself it doesn't matter because he's building something." Nobody moved. "It matters," Claire said. "That's it. That's the whole statement. It matters, and the fact that nobody ever asked you about it is not the same thing as it not mattering, and you are allowed to say it out loud, and you don't have to wait until you're standing in a hallway." At 3:56, a reporter said, "Ms. Morgan, do you forgive him?" At 3:57, Claire Morgan said, "That's not your business," and walked away, and it was the single most quoted sentence of her life. At 8 o'clock that night, her phone had 2,000 messages. At 8:40, Bernadette read them out loud in the kitchen and made Claire eat a sandwich. "Ohio." "Bernie." "Shut up, I'm reading. Ohio." "Ms. Morgan, I have a patent from 1988 in a drawer. My husband died in 2011. I never told anyone. I'm 73 years old and I'm telling you." Bernie. "Georgia. I stopped my dissertation in 1996, watching from Savannah." Bernadette scrolled. "Arizona, Manitoba. There's one from Ireland, Claire." "Stop." "Nope." Bernadette kept reading. "Watching from Cork. I run a bakery. I designed the ovens." At 8:44, Claire Morgan put her head on her sister's kitchen table and laughed until she couldn't breathe. At 9:10, she said, "I know what I want." "What?" "Gerald asked me what I want, and I didn't have an answer, and I've had an answer for 4 hours, and I've been too scared to say it out loud." Bernadette set the phone down. "Say it out loud." At 9:11, Claire Morgan said, "I want to build again." At 10:02 the next morning, in a conference room on the 41st floor, Claire Morgan told a board of directors that she would not be their CEO. "Ms. Morgan, I'll be your chief technology officer," she said. "I'll be on the board, I'll own the license, and you'll hire a CEO, and it'll be a real one, and I'll tell them no in that chair whenever I feel like it." At 10:04, Gerald Vance said, "Who do you want?" At 10:05, Claire Morgan said, "Marcus Whitfield." The room made a sound. "He's 26 years old," somebody said. "He's 27 in March," Claire said. "And in 2021, he spent 2 weeks of his own time writing around a piece of code because a comment at the top of it told him somebody had loved somebody, and he got yelled at for it, and he did it again the next year." She looked around the table. "You want to know what I want in a chief executive? I want the person who protects the thing when nobody's looking and nobody thanks them and it costs them a performance review. That's the whole job. That's the only part of that job that's ever mattered, and there's a boy on floor 36 who's been doing it for free since he was 22. At 10:08, Gerald Vance said, "He'll say no." "He'll say yes," Claire said. "I'll ask him twice." At 10:40, she asked him twice. "Ma'am, absolutely not." Marcus. "Ms. Morgan, I've never run anything. I ran a team of 4 and 2 of them quit." "Why'd they quit?" "Because I wouldn't let them touch the initializer." At 10:41, Claire Morgan smiled for the first time in 4 weeks. "Yeah," she said, "I know." At 11 on the 6th of December, they took the sign down. There was no ceremony. Claire had refused 3 separate proposals for a ceremony, including one with a drone. There were just 400 people who came out on the street on a cold morning because nobody told them not to, and Walter, who had asked very quietly if he could be the one to hold the door. At 11:06, Parker came off the building. At 11:14, Morgan went up. At 11:15, nobody cheered because Claire had asked them not to, and 400 people stood on a sidewalk in Seattle in total silence and watched a name go up on a tower, and it was the loudest thing any of them had ever heard. At 11:20, Dana said, "Ma'am, are you going to say something?" "No." "Ms. Morgan." "Dana, I said everything I had to say in a hallway in October." At 11:22, a 9-year-old girl in a puffy coat came up the sidewalk holding her grandfather's hand. "Ms. Morgan," Walter's voice went, "this is Simone." At 11:23, Claire Morgan crouched down on a sidewalk in front of a building with her name on it. "Hi, Simone." "Hi." The kid squinted up at the sign. "Is that your name up there?" "It is." "My grandpa says you made the whole thing." "I made a piece of it. A lot of people made the rest. He says you made the important piece. At 11:24, Claire looked up at Walter, who was looking at the sky very hard. Yeah, Claire said. I made the important piece. Simone thought about that. Was it hard? It was really hard. Did anybody help you? At 11:25, Claire Morgan said, No, baby, nobody helped me. That's not fair. No, Claire agreed. It wasn't. Simone frowned up at the letters. But your name's up there now. It is. So it worked out. At 11:26, Claire Morgan laughed with her eyes full and said, Yeah, sweetheart, it worked out. At 11:27, Simone said the thing that Claire would tell in speeches for the next 20 years in rooms full of women who cried when she got to it. When I make something, Simone said, I'm going to put my name on it right away, at the beginning, not at the end. At 11:28, Claire Morgan said, Simone, look at me. Yeah, do that, she said. You do exactly that, at the beginning, every time. Do you promise me? I promise. At 11:29, Walter Reyes turned around so nobody could see his face. The first letter came in January. Claire found it in the mailbox at the house between a utility bill and a catalog, and she stood in the driveway holding it for 11 minutes. She didn't open it. She put it in the drawer with his watch. The second one came in March. She didn't open that one either. By June, there were 9, and Bernadette said, Are you ever going to— No. Claire. Bernie, I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest. If I open one, I'll answer it, and if I answer it, I'm in a correspondence. And if I'm in a correspondence, then for the next 5 years, my Thursday belongs to a man in Sheridan, Oregon. She closed the drawer. I did that. I did that for 15 years. I'm not doing it from a distance of 400 miles, because it's easier to be married to somebody who can't interrupt. That's the smartest thing you've ever said. Bernie, I'm serious. That's a woman talking. That's not a wall. At 6:40 on a Tuesday in September, the 10th letter came, and this one had a different handwriting on the envelope, and Claire opened that one because it was from a federal correctional institution's education department. It was one paragraph. It said that Ethan Parker had been teaching a GED math class for 11 months, that he had been the most consistent volunteer in the unit, that the writer was required to obtain permission from a listed party before allowing an inmate to be featured in a facility newsletter, and that Claire Elizabeth Morgan was, per the inmate's own request, the only listed party. At 6:44, Claire Morgan sat down on the floor of her own hallway with a letter in her hand. At 6:50, she called Margaret. He put me down as his person. I know. You know, Claire, I'm his ex-wife's attorney, not the CIA, but I do read a docket. Margaret paused. He hasn't listed anybody else in 2 years. Not his mother, not a friend, not a lawyer. Nobody's visited him. Not one person. Do you know how many people that man had in his phone? Margaret, 2,400, Margaret said. I've seen the list. It was in evidence. At 6:53, Claire said, Am I supposed to feel bad? No. Then why do I? Because you're a decent woman, Margaret said, and that's an expensive thing to be, and you've been paying full price for it since 2009. A pause. Claire, listen to me. You don't owe that man a Thursday. You don't owe him a signature. You don't owe him a visit. And if you never think about him again, that's not cruelty. That's arithmetic. But nothing. Margaret, but... At 6:55, Margaret Reed sighed, and it was the sound of a woman losing an argument she'd been having with herself for 4 decades. But he's teaching math to 19-year-olds in Oregon, and he didn't tell anybody, she said. And he asked a federal newsletter for permission from the only person on earth he ever lied to. And I've been doing this for 40 years. Claire and I've never seen a man do that. Not one. They write books, they do podcasts, they find God in a very loud way. She stopped. He didn't do any of that. He put your name on a form and taught a class. Claire didn't say anything for a while. Margaret, yeah. What do I write back? Whatever you want. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got, honey, and it's the first time in 16 years you've been able to use it. At 7:20, Claire Morgan wrote back. One line, she spent 2 hours on it. She wrote, permission granted. Put your own name on it. At 9:15 on a Thursday in November, 3 years to the month, Marcus Whitfield knocked on the doorframe of the CTO's office. "Boss, don't call me that." "Boss, we have a problem." "Is it the allocation path?" "It's always the allocation path." At 9:16, Claire Morgan stood up and rolled a chair over and said, "Show me," and a 29-year-old CEO of a company with $400 million in revenue sat down next to her and they argued about a shim for 2.5 hours. And it was, she would tell Bernadette that night, the best morning she'd had in 20 years. At 11:50, Marcus said, "Can I ask you a thing?" "No." "Ms. Morgan, ask." "They want you to do the keynote in Lisbon." At 11:51, Claire Morgan went completely still. "No." "Ma'am." "Marcus, I said no." "They're not asking because of him." "They're asking because of him." "They're asking," Marcus said carefully, "because you're the only person alive who's written a system that ran 16 years without a single failure, and there are 4,000 engineers who'd like to hear how, and if you say no, I have to go stand up there and tell 4,000 people about a thing I didn't build." At 11:53, Claire Morgan sat back in her chair. "Lisbon," she said. "Lisbon. He gave that keynote in 2019. "I know," Marcus said. "I was in the audience. I was 22, and I flew coach, and I stood in the back, and I listened to him tell 4,000 people about the 6 days." He shrugged. "Ma'am, I'd like a do-over. Personally. If that's selfish, I'm sorry." At 11:55, Claire Morgan said, "Book it." At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Lisbon time on a stage that Ethan Parker had stood on 6 years earlier, Claire Elizabeth Morgan looked at 4,000 engineers and did not use the slides. "I'm going to tell you about a night in 2010, she said. At 4:14, she told them about the compile error. At 4:22, she told them about the card table. At 4:31, she told them about 3:41 in the morning and turning around to wake a man on a couch and not doing it because he had a breakfast. At 4:33, 4,000 people were completely silent. "I want to tell you the technical lesson," Claire said, "because you came for a technical lesson, and you deserve one. And then I'll tell you the other thing, and you can throw the other thing away if you want." At 4:34, she gave them 11 minutes on failure domains, and it was according to 3 separate publications, the best conference talk anyone had given that decade. At 4:45, she said, "Okay, the other thing." The room leaned in. "That kernel ran for 16 years without failing," Claire said. "Do you know why? Not because I'm a genius. I'm not. There are 40 people in this room better than me, and I could name 6 of them." She let that sit. "It ran because I built it to run without me. I built it so that a 22-year-old who'd never met me could keep it alive at midnight without asking permission. That's the whole discipline. That's the entire craft. You build the thing so it doesn't need you standing next to it explaining it." She paused. "And then I did the exact same thing with my life." Nobody moved. "I built a marriage that ran without me," Claire said. "I built it so well that the man inside it stopped noticing I was there, and then I called that love, and I did it for 15 years, and it worked perfectly, which was the problem, because a thing that runs without you eventually runs without you." At 4:48, somebody in the 4th row started crying, and it wasn't a woman. "So here's the other thing," Claire said. "Free of charge, from a 54-year-old woman who spent 30 years being the most competent person in every room she was ever invisible in." She looked out. "Build the system so it doesn't need you," she said, "and then put your name on it, at the beginning, not at the end." At 4:49, 4,000 people stood up. At 4:52, Claire Morgan walked off a stage in Lisbon and into a hallway and put her back against a wall and laughed until she cried, and Marcus Whitfield handed her a bottle of water and had the enormous good sense not to say a word. At 8:20 that night in a hotel room 6,000 miles from a kitchen with a landline in it, Claire Morgan called her sister. "Bernie." "I watched it." "You watched it?" "Claire, everybody watched it. It's on the internet. It's got 11 million views and it's been up for 4 hours. Bernadette's voice was thick. "Aunt Ruth's daughter posted it. Aunt Ruth's daughter, Claire. She hasn't spoken to me since 2004. Bernie. Honey. I'm okay. Claire said. I know you are. No, listen to me. I need to say it to somebody who knew me before. Claire sat down on a hotel bed. Bernie, I'm okay. Not brave, not healed, not any of the words they're going to use. I'm a woman who has a job she loves, and a sister who drove 4 hours, and a kid named Simone who's going to put her name on things at the beginning. A pause. That's it. That's the whole thing. I'm 54 and I'm okay, and it took me 30 years, and I'd do the 30 years again if this is where they let out. At 8:24, Bernadette Morgan said, Claire, yeah, I'm proud of you. Bernie, no, I need you to hear it in the right order, Bernadette said. I'm not proud of you for the Colonel. I'm not proud of you for the tower or the talk or the 11 million views. I was proud of you at the card table in 2010, in an apartment with a broken radiator when nobody knew and there was no name on anything, and you did it anyway alone at 3 a.m. Her voice broke. That's when you were the best you've ever been, honey. All the rest of this is just the world finally catching up. At 8:27, Claire Morgan sat on a hotel bed 6,000 miles from home and cried for the last time about any of it. The final letter came 11 months later, forwarded from a house she'd sold. She opened it in the car. It was one line. It said, "They put my name on the newsletter." It looked strange. I've been thinking about that for a year. E. At 5:40 that evening, Claire Morgan sat in a parking garage and read it 4 times. Then she folded it and put it in the console and drove to work. She never answered it, but she kept it. Because that, in the end, was the entire truth of Claire Elizabeth Morgan. She was never a woman who took things from people. She was a woman who kept what was hers. And she had waited 15 years at a card table at 3 a.m. in an apartment with a broken radiator for one single person on this earth to say her name out loud and mean it. So she said it herself. She said it in a hallway to 40 microphones. She said it on a stage in Lisbon to 4,000 people. She said it to a 9-year-old girl on a sidewalk in the cold, and it went up in steel on the front of a building in Seattle, where it will be long after every man who ever underestimated her is dust and rumor and a footnote in somebody else's story. Claire Morgan built it. Claire Morgan owns it. And nobody will ever take her name off that wall again.